Okay. So right from the beginning, we've sort of been treating the various moving parts of the web application on their individual terms. And these lines, when I'm talking about the individual aspects, individual pieces of machinery, I'm talking about, in broad terms, the client side, which is the browser, and the server side, which is your Ruby application, coupled with a database program. Um, Lines are starting to get blurry. And this is where all of these lines start to cross. We start taking data from the client side and sending it to the server side for storage and later retrieval. So today we are going to do exactly that. We're going to create a form on the client side to collect data from the user. I like to call users agents. I picked up that habit from a prof at the University of Calgary. She always thought user meant like drug user or some sort of abuser. So she always called them, well, she didn't really have a name. She called them operators, computer operators, which I think is probably nicer, but it's longer to say. So as part of designing a form for your front end, you have to have an awareness of how the front end communicates via the web server, which then passes information onto your application. So we're going to look at the two very important methods that we use to do this. And then we'll see how, okay, so now you've sent this data from your form, and what you need to do is define a route in some way for Sinatra, your Sinatra application, to receive this data and then really just give it to the database. And as part of that, we're going to make sure that, the data exists, at least in the demo. There's other different validations we can perform. For example, we can make sure that the information provided is an email address, for example, or it's numeric data as opposed to string data. These are what we call validations. So, filled out lots of forms. Up until now, you've been using Tux primarily to interact with the database. Now we're going to give it that nice user front end. And so, of course, this is, I'm not sure why this is an American income tax return. Lighthouse is a Canadian company. But yeah, we've all filled out forms like these. Paper doesn't directly translate into HTML, so that what we do to collect all this information, all the information that we would put up here, say that looks probably like our first name or our last name. That's probably our first name, and street address and all this kind of stuff. We have to create individual fields to collect this data, and this is all wrapped inside of a form. So this form tag has two very important parameters, which you pretty much, well, I don't think you'd really want to try to avoid these. It's just kind of all part of it. But we define the action that takes place on our server side. So this is client-side code that's preparing data to send, excuse me, to the server side. Of course, this form needs to know where to send that data. That's what we define in the action. This is a route that we define in Sinatra. Alongside that is the method attribute. This is asking for an HTTP verb. HTTP, so you've all seen this, stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. As part of this protocol, the standard way of communicating, we have 5 verbs. We have get, post, delete, put, and patch. We really only use one in this case, sometimes 2, but mostly just one, and that's the post. So we post our data to the server, and we set that method of transmission and what to expect on the server side in that method attribute. So actions, methods. Method tells us how the form will be processed. There we define on the server side what method is going to receive this data. Doesn't matter what that method does with it, but we have to tell it where to send the data. So get, this is the most common one, I would argue. This is used typically for search and filtering data. There's kind of a rule of thumb when using get and versus post. But let me just show you an example of a get. So if I just go to Google, so it's good for search. You'll see a whole bunch of weird stuff right up here at the top. This is all part of a GET request. It's visible to the user. There's no secret there. It's not meant to be kept secret. So if I make a search, you're going to see a couple of parameters. We'll say, I don't know, we'll just say Calgary, Alberta. And you'll notice that a couple of parameters changed up here. We've got this Q, which probably stands for query. I'm asking a question of Google. And I've got a second element there, the AB part. So when I want to find about Calgary, Alberta, and I want to find out from google.com, I pass it these parameters. Google on its server side receives this, performs its algorithm, finds its matches, and sends them back to the client side. So that's a GET request. You do this all the time. You might not even have realized it. If you're really curious, you just want to verify this. Now, there's going to be a lot of junk in here, but you can see the kind of requests that are being made. I think I might have to refresh. Am I looking in the right one? Okay, yeah, here we got a whole bunch of different ones. This, Google is on the surface is a very simple page. I mean, it's not very highly stylized or anything, but you can see there's a lot of stuff going on back here, and I'm just trying to find. Here's the search. Here's the request URL, and here's the GET. This is a GET method. It says expect some data to come on the command or along with the URL. Okay, so the flip side to that, well, I guess it's not really a flip side, but it's the very popular alternative. If ever you're adding data or you're manipulating data, you typically don't use a GET, which has all its parameters clearly visible to the user. You typically use a POST. This is used for creating data or changing the state. Somehow you're gonna affect some change on the server side. You do that with a POST. Data is not visible. This is kind of a half truth because what I just showed you in the inspector, you can actually see that POST data. You can rest assured that if you are communicating with the server, that this is data that is meant to be seen by you. But the possibility is there. It's not secret. It's just a little bit harder to find. So when we post data, or even when we get data, we have to have a matching action defined in our actions.rb file. So this is what we call routing. We have a bunch of different routes. So for example, let's say we had a URL or a domain called example.com, or I don't know, something you need to sign up for. So you would go to example.com/signup. This would perform a GET and give you back the form that you need to fill out to create an account on this application. Likewise, you probably see a login page, and in the case of Instagram, you're going to gain access or be allowed the ability to create new posts and post new pictures. So to do this, we actually have to create the form. And what's not being spoken of here, which will be spoken in a couple of days, is this not a standard really, but the practice called REST, R-E-S-T. So we're giving you the introduction to REST without explaining what REST is. But as part of this, any sort of RESTful request, post or GET, whatever it may be, you need to provide an interface for the user to interact with a form of some kind. So to do this, we create a new page or a new view. We display the form to the user. We set our action and our method of posting in our form. And then when Sinatra receives the form, it says, okay, well, is this data good? Okay, if it is, then save it to the database or do some other action. And if it's bad, notify the user and give the user the chance to fix it. So here's an example of one of those fields. Nothing you haven't seen before, I'm sure. You might not know how they do it, but I guarantee all of you have filled out a form of some kind at some point. To make what you see here, to render this on your web page, you need two components: a label, here called username, and an input field. So this is the actual box into which you enter data. There's a couple of points to note. When you're creating a label, you have to tell what it's labeling. What is this label for? And this for, it doesn't match an ID or a class like in CSS. It matches this parameter here. So if you want to label the username field, you have to make sure that these two match. Otherwise, I think it's mostly just a formatting issue. It's not going to be a functional issue. It's just going to look really weird. Some other parameters that are really absolutely essential is that, there's tons of different types of input fields. Again, you've seen all of these things, right? Radio buttons, checkboxes. Some fields only take passwords. Some fields only take email addresses and this kind of stuff. We determine what type of field this is by assigning this type parameter. So we know that because this is a text type input, it's just going to receive text data. The name is also very important, and it's not just for the label. The name is what is the key symbol assigned when you send this data. So you'll see what I mean by that in a second, but this is something to be mindful of, to be aware of, and to know exactly how you've structured your data on the client side. And then finally, here's the ID, which is just what we might use for CSS or JavaScript or something like that. So yeah, lots of different types of fields. We've already mentioned text, email, and password. Probably guess what each of these does. And if you want to know more types of input fields, of course, I mean, that's what we have Google for and all, and the internet. Here's a link if you choose to follow it. These each behave in a different way and serve as a type of client-side validation. So even before the user submits his email or whatever it might be, well, actually, I guess in this case it would be an email using this example, the client makes sure that it is, in fact, a properly formatted email. If it's not, the browser won't let that information be submitted. So these are very useful if you can use them. Password, on the other hand, just conceals it. So you're setting your password for the first time, for example, you're logging in after you've signed up. You don't want people looking over your shoulder. So these different types of fields behave in different ways. So this is all stuff that's going to be defined in your actions part B. This is that route. You want to put some slashes after the URL. You have to have a matching route. So this is the one that you should be familiar with, at least in the demonstrations. I've always, or up until this point, have done everything in sort of a single page app style. If we want to do a different route, we define it in actions.rb. So in this case, the example shown here has set up a route to receive posted data, and then what you do with that, it's really up to you. You got to make sure that the passwords match, for example. You have to make sure that this is an email address, maybe again. That's all up to you as the developer. So if this seems like really fast, this is just one of these sets of slides that is best to be looked at, and then to kind of work out the details in a demonstration. So rest assured, we will cover all this stuff. So here's kind of a simplified form. Of course, we're missing a couple components: the name, or sorry, the method, and the action. And we're missing some labels, of course, but we've got a series of 3 input fields, and this is why name is important, because when this user presses the submit button, because every single form always has a way to send this data, this action is going to receive a hash. This hash is called params. It's a special hash, and it's just always there. So if the user sends information, it's going to be stored in this params hash. Again, wait for the demo. By setting these names, you are setting the key symbol in that params hash. I sort of spoke to this a few minutes ago, but again, you'll see this. So here's this idea. We've received it. This particular user has entered an email, a username, and a password, and press submit on the button. This code in your actions.rb file receives this data. It gets the email from the params. Remember, this is just a simple hash. You index a hash with that key symbol, and we assign it to a variable. So this is a little bit unnecessary, but that's okay. Likewise, with the password, I'm not doing any encryption here, but the simple example. Using this information, we create a new user. And then here, which is just kind of glossed over, we attempt to save that user. So this is where validations would step in. So now here's the question. I don't know, he looks like a pretty trustworthy guy. Validating user input. So let's just say hypothetically, this user has already signed up for an account with your Instagram or whatever application you're working on. Maybe this user forgot that he'd signed up. That's up to you as the developer to determine. Active Record makes this really easy by allowing us to perform these validations. So in this case, we're making sure that the user set an email and a username. So that we determine this by setting this presence flag to true. I want to make sure that this username has not been duplicated by someone else. The same thing with the email. So the email has two validations. Make sure that the user provides an email, and make sure that it's unique, that this email has not yet been entered into the database to create an account. This code here, I kind of hesitate to show it just because it might confuse things, but it belongs where this comment is. So we've received the data, we've created a new user, but we haven't saved that user yet. This user doesn't exist. So we try to save it. We call this save method, and Active Record performs these validations for us. It makes sure that the username is unique, the username is present, and that the email is unique. If it works, then you redirect to another page. It just says congrats here. Something that's not really good user experience, but that's what's happening. If it fails, because when you try to save an object to the database, it's going to return a Boolean value. Did this thing save? If it did, then yes, this condition is true. Otherwise, if this returns false, we execute this code instead and render the page again, the sign up form. It's kind of, it doesn't make a lot of sense with me talking to you, but this is basically the play-by-play for the demo. So let's get to that. So this is kind of that first day where you guys will be blurring the lines further between front end and back end. I mean, they're still very tightly, they're not decoupled, I guess. They really don't, I was going to say they don't work apart from each other, but that's not really true either. We're just bringing it all together in your Instagram application. So, these are my prep notes. I've got to bring these on my other side, so I don't make sure I don't mess up here. So what I've done is this is just the same old thing that you're familiar with. You haven't seen it, didn't see it last class because we kind of did some different stuff. But this is just my like hypothetical rocket stove project page. I guess it's not really hypothetical because it does exist. Uh-oh, what happened? Okay, so there it goes. Nothing new, just another project that I've cloned from the previous state. We're going to add to it like what we've been been doing. So very simple version, because you guys will be adding posts and users. All I want to do is make it so that whoever comes along can submit a new video of a rocket stove in action. I actually do have one in the works, but this one's going to be borrowed from some other YouTube guy. Okay. So first thing we have to do, if you remember from the slides, we have to add some way for our user to enter this data. So I'm just going to close some of this stuff down. This was the state I left it in a couple of weeks ago. Probably need that one. Apply some styles to our form. We'll need this one because this is where, well, you know what? Just while I'm here, I'm just going to clean this up. So I've got some pictures at the bottom. I don't want to clutter things, so I'm just going to get rid of this. The ones I'm talking about are these ones. I never really did much with them. My intention was to style them, but we never got quite that far. So I'm going to take this one out, and I'm going to put my link. I'll provide the user an opportunity to create a new post. Very simple example. So first thing we need to do is create a new view. And since we're adopting this this RESTful style, which you'll get a little bit more instruction on that in a couple of days, but we're adopting this RESTful style, which sort of demands that, well, at least in this case, it demands a new view. So I'm calling it new because I want to create a new post, new rocket stove video. So first thing I want to do is just define that form. I've already seen this action. Don't have anything there yet. We'll leave that blank for now. But this is going to be not a get. You could use a get, I think. It's going to be a post. So this tells the client how to format this data and package it all up for transport to the server. Now, inside this one, we're just going to take two fields. We're going to take a link to a rocket stove video from YouTube and a description to apply to this video. So I'm going to make a couple of inputs. So these are the input fields that accept the data. It's going to be an ordinary text input. We'll call it URL. So this defines the key symbol in the params hash. We'll leave that out for now. And we'll do another one for a description. We're going to build this up really slowly so you can kind of see, well, this is really how I do it when I'm doing this kind of work. I just start very small and just build upon. I don't do everything at once. So I'm going to refresh. I guess I can't refresh this page. Well, I can't see the new page yet. So I think I need to go back a step. So I at this point, I can't do this. Right? There's no way I can do this because I haven't defined a route. So if I do that, watch what happens. Okay, right. Sinatra doesn't know this ditty. And this is probably one of the nicest, I don't know, it's such a trivial way to help, but it is helpful in its own way. So I'm going to copy this and put this into my actions RB file and watch the difference now. I think I've done this demonstration for you. We can get rid of all this. That's from last day when we didn't have a database hooked up. So now this time, since I've defined this route, the Sinatra knows what to do. We've told it what to do. We just say, okay, let's do hello world. There it is. Okay. What we've done here, though, is we've created the opportunity to present the user with a view. And that view is this newly created form that's going to, at this point, just present two input fields. So I'm going to what am I going to do here? I'm going to take this and use this ERB method. So I think this is kind of your first exposure to new views. I might be wrong about that. But all I'm telling it is, okay, go into this views directory. This is a Sinatra default, and find the file that matches this symbol right here. So it's going to look for the new file right there. I refresh this time, very slight difference. And there we go. We've got two input fields. So at this point, you know, I can type in a URL and a description. And then what? I don't have any way to actually send the data. I'm missing a button. I'm missing some labels. This isn't really helpful, right? So let's do a couple of labels first. So we'll change up our new view. Say label 4 equals name. Oh, no, sorry. URL, I'm thinking from the slides. We'll just say URL, and we'll put a colon there. We'll do the same one for the description. And since this was kind of a glaring oversight, I needed some way to actually send this form, right? I got to have a button, a submit button. And that's just called, that's a type submit. So we sort of talked about password, email, text. Submit is just another type, and it's a special type that calls this post method. So we'll leave that out like this for now. Keep it very simple. Let's see what the change I made. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So I wonder what would happen. I'm not going to fix it. I'm just going to see what happens. I'm guessing that they're going to be both one on top of each other on this first one. There's no harm in trying this stuff out, right? It's a really good way to kind of get a better understanding. It looks like it doesn't matter. So this label is, I don't want to say it's purely cosmetic, because it is absolutely necessary, because otherwise the user's not going to know what information to enter. But in this case, at least, it didn't make a difference. So, but just to keep things nice and tidy, I'll change that up. So yeah, this isn't really that great. At this point, you know, I think we should probably spread it out, apply some styles. So I'm going to open up my, where do we go? Public styles and style CSS. So these are just the ones I used in previous demonstrations to style the Rocket Stove homepage and to put the video in the background and all this kind of stuff. So to do this new view, I'm going to put all the new style at the bottom. And because this is actually this took a lot of trial and error on my part this afternoon, so I'm just going to copy and paste, and we'll talk about what's happening here. Just make it look a little nicer. So some of this is in anticipation. So I've defined this class. We don't really need to worry about that right now. Let's focus on the input. So the input, of course, is not this one right here. All of these different tags, elements, right? I want to put some space around them. I want to increase the size so that you can see it on your cell phone, or make it a little bit bigger on your desktop, whichever way you want to do it. So the other one I'm doing, I think I did label as well. No, maybe no label. Oh yeah, there it is. So I've done a couple of things so that these fields aren't all on one line. I've displayed them as blocks so that the label will be on top of the input field, on top of the other label, on top of the input field, on top of the button. That's what's happening there. And just to give us a little bit more space, because this is, I don't know, it's probably about 30 characters long. I'm going to spread that across the entire screen. So let's refresh. Actually, I got to save that one first. We'll see what kind of changes we've made. Should look a little bit more reasonable. There we go. So it's still kind of cruddy. this is where this style steps in. So this should be a little bit of review, but I've set some styles so that I can wrap all of this form inside the div and define this form with this class and give myself, a bigger font size, center everything, hopefully a little bit nicer, tighter on the screen, give us a little bit of space around the margins. And just for fun, I put this garish green border around it. So let's see what that, well, let's affect that change first of all. So if I go to new RB, this is my proposed plan of action. I say div class equals, what was it? Submit form. I don't want that dot when I'm using HTML. But now this entire thing is nested inside this div tag, and I think it's a little bit nicer to look at, except for maybe the border. See what it looks like now. So a few changes, and this really adds a lot to the user experience, just making it easy to read for one. So I don't know, like I'm not a designer, but after all my trial and error, this is kind of what I came up with. I increased the size of the labels, increased the size of the font that goes into here, and they increased the size of the submit button. This was all motivated because, as always, I always look at the mobile version first. And so that's not like super good, but this also isn't a really great emulator either. But without that, it's going to be a lot smaller, a lot harder to see. So we'll just leave it at that for now. I think actually, though, maybe if we change it, it might be a little bit better. No. Huh. Look different. Trials and tribulations of being a web developer. Okay, so we'll leave that there for reference, and we'll move forward. So one thing that might have occurred to you at this point, I'm not sure. But say I'm on my web page, or I'm a visitor to this web page. How do I know that there's a way to submit a new video? I have to give that user a link on this side. So just because I'm really lazy, and that's at least in this industry, it's a very good quality to have. I'm going to recycle some of the styles I've already used, and this is going to be on the index.erb. So the style I'm going to use is this aside. That aside makes it look like this. All I want is a link. I want to give my visitor, my guest, an opportunity to create a new post. So I'll take this, copy that down here at the bottom, and I say, just give myself a link. So now this href here, I don't need to say, I don't need to provide it this whole URL here. This whole thing is going to go to there, but since I didn't provide it this information, we know that it's going to be sent back to your application. It's not going to go off somewhere weird. So we don't need to provide it that information. We don't need this because that will open it in a new browser. Don't need that. This. So this is what it's going to say. Add, or let's say submit a new rocket stove video. Refresh, go nice and slow. So right at the bottom, when it comes up, I should see my new link. There it is. So when I call this, and you can see the URL at the bottom of your browser, you guys probably already know this, and it points to that /new. I didn't need to provide anything else. I click this, talks to the server talks to Sinatra, and Sinatra calls this method here. And all it does at this point is it renders this new document. Okay, so at this point, we're still missing something pretty critical up here. We haven't specified the action to take when the user submits this form. So now I'm going to do this again in the RESTful style. If you don't understand why, that's okay. It'll become a little bit more clear, I think. We say new video. We'll just say video like that. Post method's already there. Now I'm going to try it out. I'm going to get a helpful warning from Sinatra. Watch what happens. Press submit. It's going to try to talk to my Sinatra application, and it says, oh no, Sinatra doesn't know this, did he? And it gives me this handy thing I can copy and paste. Just like that. This, of course, goes into actions.rb. So we'll skip over the Hello World demo, and I'll show you what's inside of this params. Params.inspect. So instead of just saying hello world, I'm saying, okay, well, I know I've received some data, or at least I should have. Let's see what's inside of it. It's going to be it's a hash going to be turned into a string. So let's try that again. Let's go here. We'll refresh. And we'll say video.com test video. I submit. It talks to that route that I just defined. It's doing it in a little bit different way, but now you can see these parameters. You see that URL, which I named, and the description, which I named. And now this is very useful to me because these are also the same column names in my database. Just to show you how we can dereference these, I'll say the URL, and I'll do some string interpolation. And just to show you what you're actually doing when you're talking to the database. Yeah, let's make that a little, tidy that up a little bit. All right, so let's refresh that page. It's going to post the exact same data again, so I don't need to go back and resubmit. See, it's even asking me. It says, okay, well, you've already tried to do this. Are you sure you want to do it again? You say, yes, continue. The URL is video.com, and the description is test video, just like that. So this is how we retrieve the data and create our new record in the database. So we got to do a couple things. Let's first do this. We'll create an instance variable in anticipation of the steps to come. And we'll say video.new. And I could do a couple of things here. I could say pass it a hash like this and say URL, params, URL like that, and send it off. But since params is already a hash, I can just skip this step. Take all this stuff out and take the short and easy way. And this is going to create a new video object. Now, by calling new, I haven't actually put it into the database, but I've prepared an object that can now communicate with the database if we choose. So, let's try that. Let's say video.inspect. And see what it looks like. It's going to look a little bit muddier than the other one, but I think it's worth checking out. So refresh, resubmit the data as a post. Oh, yeah, it doesn't give me anything good. That's too bad. Give me this weird little hash down here, but I was hoping to see something else. So at this point, we've received the data. Now we've got to, since this is a way to create a new post, naturally, we're going to try to save it. Let me just check my notes here. Validations. Okay, so like this. And I say if video.save, if this operation is successful, so this is the C in CRUD, create. If I have successfully created a video, do whatever's in here. Otherwise, go back. Let's say ERB new, just like that. So I want to give the user the opportunity to correct anything if something's wrong. So at this point, this is good. Kind of. What am I missing? Remember from the slides, we're kind of just going play by play here. Remember that shady looking guy wearing the balaclava? What was the whole point of that? Validations, yes, thank you. So a couple of validations I want to perform are presence. I want to make sure that the user actually did submit a URL and a description. Another validation I would perform is the uniqueness of the URL. So, let's suppose that this is a very popular website and everybody loves rocket stoves and everybody's submitting. I don't want to get the same one twice. I want to make sure that the URL provided is unique. So to do this, I define it in my model. And this is all stuff that Active Record does for you. It's very easy, and therein lies much of the appeal of Ruby. I say, I say validates, whoops. I say validates URL. Presence is true, and uniqueness is also true. So this validates one column in my database. And if you recall, we can look at my schema. Here's the database I'm actually using. I do have a user one, but this is the one we're interested in. We've got the URL column name and the description column name. We don't need to worry about created at or updated at. This is all handled by Active Record and the database. So the other validation I need to perform is on description. And it doesn't have to have a unique description. That's something you're going to just kind of have to trust that your users will be creative, come up with something descriptive. I just want to make sure that it's actually there. So now I've done some validations. If I try to do something weird, forget to do a couple of things, this action is now going to catch that. So I give it empty parameters. It's going to try to create a new video. It's going to try to save it, and it's going to find out, oh, wait, shoot, I don't have a description and I don't have a URL. So let's just see what happens. Refresh this. And, oh, I forgot the description. So it's doing something, it's talking, oh, no, it didn't do it, right? Nothing happened here. I'll try it again, submit. Now I'm missing both things. Here I'm a user, I'm kind of confused. I keep pressing submit, nothing's happening. I need some way to tell the user now that there's a problem. Now this is a joint effort between the database and the Sinatra application and now the client side. Because if I don't have valid data, I just create this page again, give the user the opportunity to do it again. But I also have this instance variable, and it's just waiting for something, right? This instance variable is very handy because it contains these error messages. So if I come back to my new.erb, what's a good way to do this? I want to provide myself some feedback. I'm just going to call it class equals errors. I can style these if I want. So if I get some error messages back, I can color them red or something like that. And I'm going to loop over all the error messages. Video.errors, a method called on the video object, full messages dot each. So what do you suppose will happen if there are no error messages? Well, this still gets called. I'll all this code will be executed, but since it's an empty array, it won't ever actually execute the code inside. So we can just kind of cheat ourselves here a little bit, save ourselves some typing, and not perform any sort of if-else check or anything like that. Each kind of operates in that capacity all by itself. So for every single error message, though, in this unordered list, I want to create a new list item. And I will print out the message to the screen. So I use that special alligator tag that puts it out to the screen. And I retrieve whatever values in this full messages array. Okay, so let's try that out. This isn't going to work. Just heads up. Let's see if you can find out why. So we'll refresh. I don't want to resubmit the form. Undefined method errors. Why do you suppose that is? Any guesses, please? Suppose I go back here. I haven't done anything really. I'm just making a simple GET request. I come here for my first time. I click on the link. I'm all excited. Oh, no method error at new. So what's the problem? First question, which action is being called here? It's this one. So I called /new. It's trying to render ERB. I look inside ERB. Oh no, well, this is the line that's caused the error. Video error message is full, and it's saying errors on nil class. That must mean that this hasn't been assigned. Right? So here's a little trick. We can just create one and just let it sit there. We don't have to worry about it. We can solve this problem. The way that looks is just by doing this. I'm not even passing it any params. It's just an empty video. Nothing special. What is special about it is that it has no errors. So by doing this and giving it this shell, I don't have to worry. It's going to try to execute that code, and it won't be a null value or a nil value. There, wonderful. Okay, so now I've prepped myself, and I've made it so that I validate my data once I send it off, and I perform these validations, and I've made a couple of changes. So now that I can see what the nature of the error is, so I press submit. Both of them are blank. I should get 2 errors. URL can't be blank, and description can't be blank. This is all stuff that Active Record produces for you because you set up these validations. If I fill in something, it doesn't even, it's just going to be garbage data because we're not going to validate on the URL. I press submit. Now it says description can't be blank. I provided a URL, but there it is. And of course, vice versa. There we go. Now URL can't be blank. So we're not in a position quite yet where we can retrieve this, or not retrieve this data. Actually, maybe we are. Oh yes, we're missing one thing though. Now, I'll show you what we're missing. So I'm going to go to YouTube. I'm just going to find a whatever the top search for rocket stove is. Rocket stove. Look, I don't even rank. My like 30 views aren't even enough. So let's use this one right up at the top. This one looks kind of cool. It's made of an old stump. And just because of the way I've set this up, if you're curious, you can of course just go to my Cloud9 account and take a look for yourself. The way I set this up is so that I embed a whole bunch of different YouTube videos using this thing here. Under the share, I don't want this one. This one doesn't work because I'm embedding it. So this, just something you should be aware of if you try to replicate this. I'm going to take this URL because it's an embedded URL and try it here. I'll even cheat a little bit more. I'm just going to get this description. So I think this should work. So fingers kind of crossed. I'm pretty confident that this is going to work. It's going to take that data, provided it a unique URL, provided it a description. Hold your breath. Oh no, what happened? So let's take a look at actions. I came to here, received all the parameters, created a new video, tried to save it. It was true. It came to here and it didn't do anything. Right, so now I've got to send the user somewhere. I've provided a new video. The data was, was good. Now maybe I want to show the user the results of the action that was taken. I would say redirect. Just go back home. I want to go up to here. And so when it does, it's going to search all those videos, including the new one, and display them to the screen. So let's find another rocket stove video. Try this one right here. Okay, got my new URL. Oh, actually, I guess I should go back here. Just to prove that it worked, we should even just check it out. So I should have 4 rocket videos now. There's the first one, second one, and oh, there's the new one. So with this great long description here. Let's create a brand new one to see what happens. So last time we tried to submit a video, it just gave us a blank screen because we didn't tell it what to do. Grab the description. Paste it there and submit. So this time it's going to call that action. It's going to attempt the save and it's going to redirect to the home page. So that's what that redirect does. Now you don't really need to know why, but this is the rule. When you're using a post request, you always redirect on success and render on failure. So failure, I send that user back to the form and I say, try again. On success, I send that person somewhere else. The reason for this is because of that confirm submission. You remember how I was pressing refresh on the post and it would ask me to confirm the submission? You don't want to risk the user submitting the same data twice because of validations, because of lots of reasons. So that's why I redirect on success, render on failure. Rule of thumb. So here's my brand new rocket stove. Let's test out some of these validations. So I'll come back. Okay, so we're going to test out these validations. I'm going to try to resubmit that same video that I just tried. I'll give it let's try again. I press submit. Oh, whoa, I really messed that up. Oh, that's going to be terrible. Oh, you have to learn how to fix that in an upcoming class. Let's see what happened. There should be like a big glaring error message down at the bottom. Oh, look at that one. Sinatra doesn't know this, did he? Isn't that funny? It went to Sinatra. Oh, that's great. Okay, so we're going to have to deal with that in a different class. What I meant to do was this. I meant to come and get this embedded thing. Where'd it go? I guess I'm going to have to refresh the page. I mistakenly pasted the description in the URL field. Because,
Many of you have watched our other video
I guess I need some more validation.
on how to build a rocket stove for only $6.08.
That guy got ripped off. I built my rocket stove for nothing.
1,000 views on that one. It's time to show the update.
Okay. All right. Getting back on track here. Embed. There we are. So this is what I want. I'm going to try to set this same video I just submitted. That looks different. Am I going to do something goofy again? Oh, there we are. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to try to set that same one. Validation should fail, because I've already got this video in my database. Okay, so URL has already been taken. Perfect. But oh shoot, where did my URL go? Right. This is an issue of usability. Why can't I just have the data that I just submitted and pre-populate those fields? Right. So I know that this data is wrong, but it could be very helpful. You know, maybe I just made a I just mistyped. I want to give that user the opportunity. So I can do this little trick, and I think this is a pretty reasonable expectation of all modern web applications. But I can set those fields here. Value equals, oh, sorry, not that one. I want the alligator tag. Value equals video dot URL. And the reason this works is because, you know, I set that empty video in actions.rb. So the first time I visit, I get a brand new one. The next time I visit, I've got this one saved. So it's there for me to use. I can come here in my new ERB and just set those values. And this is the description. So just changing the value attribute. That's all I'm doing. So let's try that again. This time, if I do it correctly, so yet another test. Press submit. We're going to still have the same problem, but this time the information and all that hard work you've done doesn't disappear, right? Much better. Likewise, so this URL has already been taken. Let's, well, I don't want to go find another one. Let's just pretend that this is good and leave the description blank. Same thing. Tries it, your URL has already been taken. I've got a new error. I forgot to enter a description. But, you know, this is really nice for your users. I've experienced this myself, and, you know, I have to describe this kind of experience as, you know, being victimized by amateurs in a way, because this should happen, right? This is a very basic expectation, and it really enhances your application for your user. Yeah, and that's it. Any questions about that? So this is basically what you're going to be doing for Instagram today, and I think you're going to work with the users. No, we're not doing authentication yet, but I will summarize this. I'll add the CSS, I'll add the example form, and the new actions.rb in the course summary, and upload the video.